What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Savvy Surgical Technologist. I'm your host, John Budd. And as always, I'm excited and happy to bring you guys on to the show. I'm always excited to take you guys back down memory lane with me. And I always want to emphasize to you guys how when I started this podcast, I wanted it to be more than just healthcare. I wanted it to be more than just about healthcare. I wanted it to be stories about my life in and outside of healthcare, because I think that the stories matter. And I always tell you guys that the stories matter, that you matter, and that if we look back over the links of our lives, we'll see why we are exactly where we are today. And a lot of the things that I go through today and a lot of the challenges or the things that I overcome today is because of my fighting spirit. You know, when I was younger, I was always in a lot of drama and a lot of things, but I found that over time and over the course of my life, now that I'm calmer, then I always tell you guys that I'm on the other side of the things that I was doing previous to the life that I have today, that I'm calmer and that I look at life differently, but I still have a fighting spirit. So what I wanted to do for you guys in this podcast is just to take you guys down memory lane and take you to some of the challenges that I faced as a young person and how it led to a lot of the dramas and a lot of the mental anguish and the things that I faced in that time frame. You know, I had recently talked about on Rebirth about an incident and things that happened in high school and before, right up to high school, that will ultimately lead me to my incarceration. And like I said, when we look back over the links of our lives, we'll see why we are where we are. And I see all the things that I was doing back then, how they affected my mental health and how they would ultimately lead to the things that I experienced inside of the penitentiary. And you know, it's funny because the fights that I had previous to me going to prison helped me navigate prison, because I knew that I was tough enough. I knew that I was able to take care of myself if something was to happen. You know, and like I said, fortunately, I only had a few incidences while I was in prison because of how I carried myself. But, you know, the traumas and the mental health that you go through, and you don't realize it when you're young. You just don't. You just think that it's life, or you don't think at all. I don't even know that I was thinking, but a lot of the things affected my mental health, you know, like dipping in and out of neighborhoods because I was worried about being seen by enemies and stuff like that, because I would be by myself or it would just be a challenging thing to be inside different neighborhoods. My mother would send me to my uncle's house to pick up things, and I would have to be like sneaking through the neighborhood, looking through bushes and stuff like that, hoping not to run into people who I knew was looking for me. But you know, again, ultimately, it led me to the life that I lead today. But again, I'm going to take you guys down memory lane. I'm going to take you guys back to some incidents that happened and that I know set me on the path of destruction that I would eventually be on. So I think I talked about this on my Rebirth channel, but years ago, I was in high school, and I'm a start in high school, even though my fighting started years before high school. I would be in fights all the time. People would come to my basement door and they would knock on the window and they would say they want to fight me. My nickname is Scooty. So they would say, I want to fight Scooty. And I would say, okay. And I would come out my back door because me and my brother, we slept in the basement. So I would go out the back door and I would do what I had to do or whatever, because I never backed down. I'm not saying that I wanted to be in these fights. I was never a bully. I think I only had one bullying incident where I bullied somebody, and I was never proud of that. And my dad really got in my ass over that. But the incidents that I'm going to talk about started in Germantown High School. So even though a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today happened in Martin Luther King High School, I have to take you back a few weeks before I got to King. So in Germantown, I was already a mess. And I always say that, you know, a lot of the things that I do today, how cerebral I am and how I think about things started back then, because I was kind of cunning back then. I was a poser. Like, what I mean by that is I was somebody who would play possum. I would act like I was scared of somebody. When I had got to Germantown High School, I always act like I was scared. So I remember this guy, this guy used to bully me all the time, and I wasn't scared of him, but I would let him think I was scared of him. He would just pick on me every day in school. I think it was in like home class, you know, where you go to be, your attendance would be taken that you were actually in school that day, but it was the homeroom. And this guy would always pick on me, man, and I would just let him. And then sometimes I would be laughing at myself because I knew I was setting him up. And looking back on it, I don't know how I how I was like that. I don't know why I was the way I was, but I was always somewhat smart. Um, so he would pick on me and pick on me and pick on me, and then finally I had enough. And he did something, and I forget exactly what it was, but I went off, and I could see the fear in his eyes. He was scared because I caught him off guard. That's the secret. Always make them think that you're afraid of them, or you're dumb, or you're stupid. Always make people think that I'm afraid of them, or I'm not as smart as them. And that's always going to give me the advantage. And I had the advantage that day. And eventually I told him, let's go outside and handle this like men, even though we was teenage boys or whatever. But he was like acting like he was tough and that he was with it. But I could see it in his eyes. I could see the fear in his eyes. So we went downstairs, and when we got downstairs, there was a whole crowd around us, and we were young, we were freshmen, and I could see that he didn't want to fight. Eventually, he walked away. I tell you guys that story just to tell you that later on in life, and a lot of the things that I do today, I'm cunning in it. And I don't like the word cunning because it seems negative. Because I'm not cunning. I'm not a negative person now. I always try to build my empire through positivity and by right action. But I'm very cerebral with it. But it all started back then. So fast forward a little bit to my 11th grade year in Germantown. Up by that point, I was already a terror. I was well known throughout the city, well known throughout certain neighborhoods in the city because Philly is big. So I don't want to say the whole city, but we all knew of each other. And we all knew who was who in certain neighborhoods and stuff like that. So this particular day at Germantown, I was supposed to go home. But every year in Germantown Hospital, high school, they would put on a show called the Pitting on a Hit Show. This was a talent show where all the people would pit on their talent. They would get on the stage, and we had a nice big auditorium. Germantown was a really nice school, but it was what's the word? Gang related, I guess. Not even gang, because Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods. It's not so much gangs like Chicago or LA where they got Crips and Bloods. We had neighborhoods. And the neighborhood that ran Germantown, that Germantown High School sat in, was Haines Street. But anyway, during this day, they had the talent show. I was supposed to go home. My friends asked me to go to the show, and I said, I don't have no ticket. And they was like, we're going to get you a ticket. So I reluctantly went, and it would lead me into years of drama. That one decision. Again, look at the links of your life. You'll find the spots in the spots in the links where your life diverged. We went in a different direction than it could have went. So that day we went to the show. Remember, guys, I'm short. Back then I was small. I didn't have any kind of muscular or anything. But even though I was always fighting, always in some shit, I don't know what I was thinking mentally and why I always thought I was so tough. Because sometimes I would walk past full body mirrors and I'd be like, whoa, man, you are so small. Like I never carried myself as small because I never seen myself as small until I looked in those mirrors. But anyway, on that day, we were in the show, in the concert, and I'm short. So I'm in the back of the auditorium. The guards or the homeroom detectives or the guard, I forget what they called them. But they had people who were patrol the hallways in our schools or whatever. But so they were at the back of the auditorium right behind me, and Mr. Williams was the principal of the school. He was patrolling the aisles. So every time we would clap or something was good, I would stand up because I couldn't really see because people would stand up in front of me. So I would stand up, and Mr. Williams would say, Mr. Bud, sit down. I'm like, man, what is this guy problem? We had a fucking concert. Like, what's wrong with him? We're standing up, people standing up in front of me. Why is he picking on me or picking me out of the crowd? Now, again, I was already well known in the office, right? For the things that I was doing in school. Straight A student, again, cerebral, but I was always in trouble. So I stood up 2 or 3 more times, and he told me to sit down very violently with his voice. And the last time I stood up, he came over to me and he grabbed me. And he said, Mr. Bud, I told you to sit down. And I flipped. I start punching him all in his face and violently hitting him. And we're tussling. Before I knew it, I was being thrown. So the auditorium had the doors. He kicked the door. And then right behind, after those doors was a little hallway. And then the doors that go outside. And we had all these steps. It was like a museum. Germantown is an old school. Look it up. It's like an old school, the design. And they had all these steps where you walk up the steps. So he threw me down the steps, and I'm rolling down the steps. And ironically, the police was walking by as he's doing this, and I'm still going crazy. My cousin, Rodney Drayton Bud, what's up, Rodney? He was walking by. The cops grabbed me, and Rodney grabbed me and said, "Hey, no, I got him. Mr. Williams slammed the door shut and went back in the thing. I ended up going home. I never told my mother, but I knew I was in trouble. Monday morning, or I don't remember what day it was. So I must say that Monday when I went back to school, because the show was on a Friday. Monday when I went back to school, I was kicked out. They had kicked me out of Germantown High School for a violent interaction with the principal. I had to go home and tell my mother, and she was mad. And if you know my mother, and I always tell you guys about my mother was nothing to play around with, although I played with her all the time. And that's why it led to a lot of the things that me and her went through personally. I wasn't accountable and responsible back then, but looking back over my life, I never factored in all the things that I put her through. Peace and love to my mother. I love her so much, and I miss her so much. And a lot of the things that I do today is to honor her. But anyway, I had to go and tell her. So then they had to decide what school they were going to transfer me to. And we had no say. It was said that I was going to be sent to Dobbins. And I knew if I was going to be sent to Dobbins, this is a school down North Philly. I wasn't from that neighborhood at all. I was known down there. They knew me or whatever. But I knew that it would have been a terrible situation. I probably would have I don't know that I would have survived in Dobbins long. Because it's just a different environment, different people. And I didn't know them. And we all know that North Philly was on another level. So anyway, not saying that I wasn't tough enough and I couldn't hang with those guys, because I could, and I've had a lot of fights in North Philly over the years. But again, they were different. So I was from Uptown, a neighborhood in like the northwest corridor of Philadelphia. It wasn't called Uptown back then. It was called Mount Airy and Germantown. Brickyard, Haines Street, different, like I said, neighborhoods. But sorry, I digress. But so I got kicked out. Ultimately, it was decided that I would go to King. And this is where the story really takes off. So I told you guys on my rebirth thing, I told you about my first day. I'm going to tell you about the first day, and I'm going to tell you ultimately what happened at the end of that day, because I never finished the story. So my first day in King, I got there. I'm surrounded by enemies. My school, Martin Luther King, is full of all my enemies. Germantown, I was in friendly neighborhoods. I grew up in Haines Street. I was from Haines. My cousins, who I grew up with, who were older than me, I admired and loved. They were well known in Haines Street, that neighborhood. And in turn, I was known. So I was safe in Germantown in terms of not being bullied, not being picked on, or I was an alpha because of all the friendships and the alliances that I had there. But when I went to King, I had no alliances. I was in enemy territory. So my first day, they knew I was coming. And I heard rumors over the weekend because I knew I was going on Monday. This was like a week later after I got kicked out of Germantown. So fast forward to that Monday when I got the King. I got the King, and I was in Mr. Washington's class. Never forget this, because I didn't know Mr. Washington, but he turned out to be the man. Great influence in my life. But it was a photography class. They had to give me certain classes because all the classes were full, and I was new. I was forced to go there. And let me go back a little bit. My first day, I had to go to the principal office. I was in the principal office with my mother, and the principal said, "We know you. You're well known. We're not going to put up with your shit that you did in Germantown here. The first few incidences that you get into, we're not going to tolerate it." So I said, whatever, because again, I was defiant. I just didn't give a fuck. I didn't care. Like, whatever you got to say. All right. So I went into the class, and during the class, I heard all this commotion outside the door. All of these guys from all my enemy neighborhoods was outside the door. They was banging on the door, hitting the door, and they were all telling me, and excuse the language, but I want to be authentic. As I always say, I want to be authentic in these stories. But they were saying, "Fuck you, Scooty. We're going to fuck you up when you come out this class." And I remember sitting there looking, and I'm laughing to myself thinking, whatever, all right, good. Let's have it, right? So I remember Mr. Washington walking up to me, and he asked me, he said, "Son," again, he didn't know me. But he liked me instantly, and you can always tell. But he said, "Son, do you want me to call security? You want me to call the principal office or whatever?" And Germantown is huge. So all these guys are outside the door clamoring. And I said, no, I'm good. I got it. So again, They still outside the door. I'm sitting at my desk, and you guys can't see me if you're on the radio, but if you're on the video, you can see me. I'm sitting on the desk. The door is right in front of me. I'm looking at the door, and there's a clock above the door. And they screaming again, knocking on the door and saying all these things that they're going to do to me. And I remember whispering to the door, mouthing to the door and pointing up at the clock. And I said to those guys, I can't wait. I couldn't wait. Because again, I was cerebral, right? Again, I didn't know how smart I was or how I was in my mind, but I just knew stuff. I knew that would disarm them. I knew that it would make them think, man, I already had reputation for being nuts. Like, oh, he crazy, always doing something. Now, I'm not saying that I won all my fights because I lost fights. But I was little. I never fought a guy my size. And I'm not making excuses. I just got my ass beat. But I won a lot of fights. But I was fearless. I didn't care. So let me reemphasize this. I was always afraid, but I overcame my fear again. And that helps me today. So the stories matter. I always tell you the stories matter. Everything, the physical led to the emotional led to the spiritual. So what I am today is because of what I went through back then. But anyway, when the bell rung, I got up, I walked outside, and I was in the middle of chaos. They was going crazy. They was telling me all the things they was going to do to me, all in my face. And I'm like, fuck, and I'm doing all the things. I'm going back and forth with them. So their leader, the guy who basically ran it all, a guy named Roberto, who I would eventually fight 4 or 5 times in one day. He beat me up 4 times in one day, 5 times in one day. I forget how many times it was. And then a buddy of mine, because I was protected, took on the fight. And he eventually beat Roberto, who was a legend, who would eventually go on to be murdered because people were so afraid of him. But anyway, me and him was jaw to jaw, face to face. And I'm like, man, they in my mind, I'm still talking heavy. I'm trying to disarm him like, fuck y'all. I can handle my business. It's whatever. We can, do whatever. I can't even emphasize to you guys the chaos that was going on during that time. But I was outnumbered. I didn't have any friends there. And I never forget this because this ultimately would save me from getting jumped, which I'm surprised because if it was me and my crew back then, we probably would have jumped the person. Or I would have, it was different back then. And I don't want to say we would have jumped them, but it would have been a free for all. But anyway, this guy named Vinny from West Oak Lane. Shout out to Vinny. I don't know where Vinny is. I haven't seen him in years, but shout out to Vinny. He was big, muscular guy, and I didn't know him. But he came into the middle of the crowd and yelled, y'all not going to fucking jump him. Y'all going to pick one person. Him and that one person, they call me Scooty. Him and Scooty, John Bud, Scooty, whatever, is going to go into the stairway and they going to fight. And ain't nobody going in to the stairway with them. I'm going to guard this door and y'all going to let them fight one-on-one. Vinny had some juice. He was from that neighborhood. And so Martin Luther King was part of Somerville, West Oak Lane, that area. Those are the neighborhoods that ran that school, that those schools sat inside of. So he had juice. So me and the guy that they picked the quarterback of the football team. Never forget this. And me and him are cool to this day. Took us years, but now today we're cool. Me and him got in the fight. The fight was nasty. It was vicious, but it was me and him one-on-one. He eventually fell. And I remember kicking him while he was down. And then we heard all this commotion outside the door with security running. He ran up the steps. I ran down the steps. And the fight was over. A couple of days later, I realized that not even a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, every day I would get up and my ankle was hurting, and I didn't know why. So I walked on his ankle, and it would hurt so bad. Every single step was a punishing step. Come to find out, I broke my ankle when I kicked him. So I didn't get caught, so I didn't get kicked out of out of King at that time. But that incident would lead me into so many other things after that. I would eventually, I had to tell my mother that something was wrong with my ankle, and she finally took me to the doctor. So I had to tell her that I was in another fight. My mother would always be upset because I would come home with all these lumps on my head. I would always come home with all these bruises and scars and stuff. And she would say, "Oh, you was in another fight." And I always remember and say, and she like, "Look at you." And I say, "Oh, you gotta see the other guy." And but she would never. She would always encourage me to to take up for myself, to defend myself. But she didn't. She wasn't happy with all the fights because I was just on a bad trajectory. And I say all that to say because looking back on it now, and I know that all of these things affected my mental health. I was just so, I guess the word is afraid all the time. And then that fear would lead me to having to do things to show that I was tough enough or big enough or bad enough. And those horrible things, those horrible decisions would lead me to prison. And I told you guys that when I got to prison, and by the time I got to prison, I was already a seasoned fighter. So I didn't get in a lot of fights. I handled my business when I was in there. When somebody ate my food or somebody did something, I broke a guy's nose once because he kept picking on me. I'll tell you guys that story another time. But, when I was in prison, I could navigate. And then I was always nice too. I remember I told you guys that I would read to people who couldn't read and stuff like that. But when I was finally, I had got kicked out of King because I was always in stuff. And I'll never forget it when I got kicked out of King. Again, dumb shit. I had a 40 ounce early in the morning, a 40 ounce of beer, drinking it. And they caught me. But I remember passing the beer to this girl and she ran and hid it for me. And I thought I was cool. I was in class because they had no evidence. Man, they tore the whole school up, went through every locker and found the beer. And they talked to the girl and she had to tell them that it was mine. They eventually took me to the office and they kicked me out of King. I had to go home and tell my mother that I got kicked out of yet another school. And she was so hurt and so mad. She went to that school and begged those people to let me back in one more time. I never thought about all the things that I put her through and all the hurt that I caused her because of all the dumb shit I was doing. But I kept doing it. And then eventually, when I came home from prison, it would metamorphosize itself into other things. I was still getting in fights, but I was an adult, so the fights would wane. I wouldn't get into as many fights because, again, I'm an adult, right? But I had other problems. I had mental health issues. I was drinking too much, partying too much, sleeping with so many different women and doing things and just not being the man that I was raised to be. That's why I always tell you that the stories, they matter. That if we look at the stories, we'll see why we were where we are, where we were in life. All that fighting that I was getting into, especially that incident in King, because King, like I said, it set me off into a different trajectory. Because, I mean, I could tell y'all more stories and more fights, but that one set it all up. And then I just was on a terrible run. I had got jumped. I was down. So every day after the let out of schools, because back then we had schools in every neighborhood. So we would go to certain places. Like in Germantown, we went to Germantown Avenue. It was a McDonald's where everybody then. I got in fights there. When I went to King, I would go we would go to Broad Downey. It was Broad Downey was where 100 schools is a big transportation center in Philly. And all the neighborhood schools would meet there. It was like a hub. So one day I was there and I had gotten a fight because we were getting on the trolleys and it was packed. I'm talking about, it was just a different era and it was so many schools, so many children, so many kids. And I remember getting on the back of the trolley and it was so crowded and I was trying to move around. Again, I was always in stuff. And in this neighborhood, Broad Downey, and that the bus that we were getting on was a neighborhood called Somerville. Again, Somerville. They basically had that trolley route. I had to be on that trolley route to go further northwest to my neighborhood, Mount Airy, Germantown. Vernon Road is where I'm from. So the guys from Somerville was on the trolley. And I stepped on this guy's foot. Now this packed, this crowded. And he got mad and started cussing me out. But I was small, right? And in my mindset, again, I always was thinking, I'm not doing a lot of fucking talking. So he was talking and telling me what he was going to do to me, and I punched him. I just sucker punched him. I didn't realize the whole trolley was with him. All I know is next thing you know, I'm getting jumped by 20 guys, 10, 15 guys on the trolley. I'm in the middle of the trolley. We fighting and we've been, and I'll never forget this because I remember grabbing a guy and we're fighting and we're tussling and I look over his shoulder out the window, just something that happened. And I see two of my friends, I'm not going to mention their names. I think one of them passed away anyway. And we're not as close to this day. But anyway, because I never forget what people do to me. But I looked out the window And I seen that my two friends, instead of running on there to help me, they were laughing, just watching me get jumped. For me, I always was in the belly of the beast. I was always surrounded by friends who were really enemies. My closest friends that I was with would eventually go on to die. All of my childhood friends that I'm really close to are all dead today. And it breaks my heart because one day I'll tell you the story about how four of us got in a car and none of us ever got out, metaphorically. Two of them are dead. One, me and the other person struggled for years and years and years with mental health because of something we did, I believe. Maybe the person who's still alive, maybe he wouldn't look at it the same way. We all have different journeys. But I know that what we did in that car led directly to the two deaths, and it led to me struggling with my mental health and alcoholism and partying for decades. The stories, they matter. So my mother had to go back and beg those people to let me back in school. They let me back into school. I was popular. I want to emphasize to you guys because it's really hard to explain in a way where you'll understand, but I was popular and I was also hated. I was popular with the ladies, the girls, they always protected me and they liked me. Like I said, the girl took the 40 and hid it for me. And I had to protect her because she was going to get suspended. And I told them that please don't suspend her. Because even back then, I had this kindness about me. I wasn't a bully. Like I said, I had the one bullying incident and that I'm not proud of. And that came back to haunt me years later because I was on the subway with me and my friend. And all these guys pulled up on me and asked me did I know the guy. The guy was gay. And I remember looking down the subway. I said, yeah, what about him? And they told me that they was going. A long story short, we got in an argument on the subway, and I let them know in unequivocal terms that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Because again, this was a few years after high school, and I was a terrorist. So I'm like, he can get some work again, but I'm on here minding my business again. But what I want to say to all of that is I'm not proud of that stuff, that incident. But for the most part, when I was growing up and when I was getting in stuff, it was just a natural progression of things. One, that I had an attitude problem. One, that I was always feeling like somebody was picking on me, or I had this anxiety, like that I had to prove myself because I told you guys in a previous episode or on Rebirth that everything started happening because my brother had gotten a fight for me because this guy had sucker punched me and I never defended myself. I went home and told my brother, and my brother got in a fight for me, and I promised myself that would never happen again. And when I made that promise, from that day forward, nobody ever just picked on me. If they picked on me, they knew that they were going to be in a fight. They were going to be in a battle. It was never an easy win with me. People beat me. And I mean, I was fighting guys 6'3". I remember I was fighting a guy. He was 6 foot tall and he was big. He was built. He was in the gym. And I remember he beat me. And a buddy of mine came and for him. He said, this was on an icy day in Philly. I had just got off the bus and the guy was saying shit to me. Next thing I'm like, whatever. So we start rumbling and he hit me and he dropped me. The only time I've ever got knocked down in my whole fight career, ever. And I'm little again, but I'm a warrior. So he dropped me and I couldn't believe it. I got up and I was like, damn, he knocked me out. I'm like, well, and I was about to fight him again. And the guy, my friend, put his hands on my chest and he said, I got him, Scooty. And my friend destroyed him. Like I said, I always had certain friends who would help me, but I also had closer friends who were frenemies. They were my enemies. They weren't really my friend. The stories, they matter, man. A lot of that stuff led to me drinking too much, anxiety, fighting in bars, doing things that just destroy me. And then, to add in the fact that I was a hustler, always trying to make money. Even though I had good little jobs, I had a job at McDonald's as a young. My mother and my dad, they taught us how to be hustlers in terms of honest money. They didn't teach us how to be nefarious. That was frowned on. My mother never wanted that for us. And she always talked to us about doing the right thing. And I thank her to this day because now that because she gave me a solid foundation. And I always tell you guys that if you have children who are struggling or going outside the bounds that you built for them, please know that you built a solid foundation and that over time, eventually they will come back to the teachings, because that I did. And I honor my mother every day, and I honor my dad every day by how I carry myself today, building my businesses, Sheila's House of Style, Rated It, Rebirth Loan Association. The things that I do, I pour into with honor. I don't do anything with a nefarious outlook anymore. But back then, they taught us how to. So Philly is a city of seasons. So every season we could have a way to make money. So me and my brother would mow lawns in the summer. In the fall, we would rake leaves. In the winter, we would shovel snow. We always had money. And then our friends that we always was little hustlers and we always had money. But eventually, I would start selling things that weren't honorable. And I never forget it. And I want to tell you guys this because I remember I used to stand on the corners with my man Joel, my best friend Joel, who passed away. Rest in peace to him. I love him and I miss him. But I remember we would sit on this corner and we would sell the things that we were selling. And when we would be finished, we would always go get oxtail in a 40. And I remember one day talking to him as we were walking home, and I told him how much I didn't like it, how much it hurt me. And I didn't know where that came from. Again, we were young and you didn't know your feelings. You were young and you didn't know your feelings. But then I look back, I just know that I didn't like it because it was against everything that I believed in. It was against everything that I was raised to be. But I didn't care because I was a follower. And my mother used to always call me a follower, but I thought I was a leader because I was big, bad, I would fight, and I had people who were fighting for me who would follow me. But that's not what following meant. I mean, that's not what leader is. Leadership is not because you got somebody behind you. Leaders lead with honor and integrity. Things that I do today, that's why I always try to pour positivity into the world today. But back then I thought I was a leader and she would scream in my face that she was a follower, you're nothing. I remember she told me one day that she didn't like me. She loved me as her son, but she didn't like me as a person because I just wasn't up to her standards the way she raised me. And I always want to emphasize this. If your children are doing things that's contrary to the way they raised you, don't put it on them. And the people who blame parents, don't do that. Don't do that. You don't know. Everything is a decision that we make individually. But I remember telling Joel that how unhappy I was, but I would continue to do it until I got locked up, until I thought I was smarter than everybody else. And I went to Virginia and I got locked up the very first day that I was there. How smart was I? I tell you guys that the stories matter because when you sit down, when you become accountable, you look back over the years, you'll know why you did the things you did, and then you'll know how to cope with stuff. I always tell you that I made it to the other side, that I finally beat the devil that I was dancing with, because for years I was challenged and I used to be so heartbroken. I tell you guys this all the time. I would go to work and then I would go out and I would party and I would do these things that were just destroying me mentally. And I would go home and I would fall on the floor and I would cry and cry and cry. And again, there's different ways to cry. It wasn't always physically crying. It was anguish. I would beg God to kill me. All that started from my fights. All that started from the mental anguish and the mental anxiety of dipping in and out of neighborhoods, or always getting in stuff. I would go into parties and they say, don't get in nothing, Scooty. And then 5 minutes later, the party would be over because I got in a fight. I believe to this day that the only reason I'm not dead, because I almost died the night before I went to prison. The night before I went to prison, I knew that I had to go to Virginia to turn myself in the next day. That night, I was at a party. Let me piggyback, and then I'm going to tell you this story and I'll move on. I was selling things that I shouldn't have been selling. And I don't want to get into the details of what I was doing. Just know that it wasn't illegal. It wasn't legal. And I'm not proud of it. But I was selling what I was selling. The night, this guy had owed me money. And I remember my friend Joel calling me and telling me he's seen the guy. This is the night before I got to go to Virginia to turn myself in. So I said, oh, where you at? And he's like, I just seen him go in his house. I said, all right, I'm going to meet you at his house. So I go meet Joel at the guy's house. We knock on the door. The guy comes out. I beat him up. Instantly. I didn't even ask for the money. I just went right at him. And I said, you can keep the money now. You earned it. He fell. And we in front of this man's house. That's how sick I was. So we eventually left and we went to this party at this club called Jared's. Big party place up in my neighborhood. Everybody was there. It was packed. Back then, partying, life was just so much different. It was so much better, even though I was trying to ruin it. But I remember standing outside in front of the club with me and Joel, and something told me to look to my right. I looked to my right, and everything happened in slow motion. These guys start jumping out their car, and it must have been I don't remember. It must have been somewhat cold or maybe they was hiding their guns. But they jumped out the car. One had a long trench coat on, and I remember the guy saying, "There he is. That's Scooty." And me and Joe, I hit Joel, and he looked. And again, I'm telling you this stuff because it looks like it's in slow motion. All I see them do is pull out a gun, like a little shotgun. My back is on the wall, and the door to Jared's is right to my left. That's the door open. There's two doors. You got to start the door, and then there's a vestibule, and there's another door in the guard, like the bouncers. I ran in, and me and Joel ran in there, and these guys are running behind us. They getting out the car, so we had a little head start jump. I remember tearing through the club, and the bouncer tried to grab. I said, no, but they knew me. So he let me go, and I remember my cousin, Lavelle, shout out to my cousin Lavelle, she was dancing. And she seen me, and she grabbed me and said, what's wrong? I said, no, they after me, or whatever. The guys, I remember, I ran past her after she grabbed me, and me and Joel ran out the back door. The guys, I looked over my shoulder, they were still on my heels. So it's still over the ways behind me. So I slammed out the back door, and it was a gate. I ran out the gate, and I ran down the driveway, because Mount Airy is a neighborhood of driveways. It's different from North Philly, West Philly. They all got neighborhood driveways, I guess. But anyway, it was this roof that I could climb up on. My cousin stopped them. She jumped in front of them. I meant to say that, to slow them up. So by the time they got outside the door, I had climbed up on this roof, and I ducked down, me and Joel, and they ran past us. They didn't see us. I tell you this story to say that even before I was supposed to go turn myself in, I still was doing dumb shit. And I almost died over it, because I know for without a doubt that I could see it in their eyes. And I say that to say that I know, because I see it all in slow motion, that they were going to fire those weapons and handle their business, because I beat I'm assuming they was just all their friends or whatever, because I beat him bloody in front of his own house. Again, not proud of this stuff, man. Wish I was different. It led to nightmares. I'm up on this roof. The next morning, I was in Virginia. I was in court. And then I would spend some time in Virginia incarcerated. The stories, they matter. They all lock in. But there's always hope, right? There's always hope if you make better decisions. I told you all those stories because that fighting spirit is what got me off the dance floor with the monsters. Even though I wanted to give up, I used to cry and beg God to kill me, man. I can't tell you how many times I would struggle. I lost all of these friends because they weren't my friends. Today, I don't have many friends. My best friend is my son and my daughters. My very best friend in my life is my son. He sacrificed so much for me. He supports me and bigs me up. He loves me. He gave us a great job up to come with me to San Diego. He's a man's man, but at my worst, he was there for me. When I was struggling at the end of my time with alcoholism, he would hug me close and tell me that I could do it, that I could win. I remember I told him one day that I didn't think I could make it, that I was on the clock. And I remember him grabbing me and say, Dad, we don't have no clocks. We don't have no clocks. Stop thinking you're going to die, you're going to lose. Don't give up. Keep trying. It's a true story. He hugged me and he said, Dad, we don't have clocks around here. Shortly after that, I started finding my way out of the dark. The journey was long and hard, man. The friends that I lost, the things that I lost along the way, opened the door up for things like my son. Opened the door up for the light that I have, that I always had. I just preferred the darkness because that's what I thought I was. Even though I tell you that I went through all that mental anguish because I was doing things that was contrary to my spirit. When you embrace who you are, your life becomes better. So I'm always going to encourage you guys to embrace who you are. Stop settling. Stop playing small. I play big because I am big. Everything on my social media, I tell you how confident I am in myself. Some people might read it as cocky, but it's not cocky because I don't do cocky things in terms of like, I'm not negative. I will never hurt anybody. I will never sell anything contrary to my spirit again in this life. And when I got home from jail, I stopped selling drugs. Thank God. But I still was sick because it's a journey. So I'm going to encourage you guys, whether you're in healthcare or outside of healthcare, to know that you are in a journey. Your life is a journey. Embrace it. Face your battles. Look inside yourself. Be accountable. Accept the faults that you have. Forgive yourself for the things that you did wrong. It took me a long time to look at myself with any kind of real self-love. I thought I loved myself, but I didn't, because you cannot love yourself if you do things that hurt yourself. Love don't hurt. So now, every day I pour into myself, and in turn I end up pouring into you because I care. Everywhere I go, in every space I feel, I try to fill it with a positive attitude. I don't do stuff that's cunning or conniving. Not anymore. I just be me, authentically me. And sometimes that, I said in the last episode, sometimes that may come off as aggression or I'm too friendly with my hands, and I hate that, and I'm trying to control that better because I understand that some people aren't comfortable with that. But I always try to say that it's not in an intentional way where I'm trying to harass anybody or anything like that. But I have to be mindful, right? So we have to be mindful to modify our behaviors to be better, because everybody should be comfortable around each other. So just to finish up this podcast, this episode, this bonus episode, Fight Night, I named it that because it wasn't just one story. I named it Fight Night because it was an internal fight throughout the years. It started physically, but it was all cerebral. It was all mental. So all the challenges that I faced and that I overcame through the fight and through the years of addiction and stuff like that, it all led me to who I am today. So I embrace the journey now, and I don't regret the journey anymore. I embrace it, and I understand that it was all part of who I am. God's plan. It was hard, man. So many heartbreaking things, so much loss. All of my friends are dead. I don't have many friends anymore. I have some who I love dearly, but it's different levels of friendship, right? When you have childhood friends and you know that they died because of some of the things that you encourage, it's heartbreaking. And then when you lose your mother and you feel like you didn't make things right with her over the years, even though my mother was proud of me, I won a lot of awards, and she had all my awards on her walls. And she told me even right before she died how I always took care of her. I still feel a sense of regret because she died too soon and I started too late. She died too soon and I started too late. So when you see me walking through the halls, or when you see me walking in the streets, know that you'll never see anybody who got any kind of ulterior motives against you or for you. If I say something, it's because I believe it. If I say I like you, or you're nice, you're beautiful, it's because I want to pour into you. It's not because I want to encourage you to do things that you don't want to do or whatever, or try to date you or anything like that. Again, if you're going through life and you're struggling with your past and the decisions that you made along the way, know that it's part of the journey. Accept it, be accountable, forgive yourself, move on, start making better decisions. I'm living proof. I have so many things going on that I'm proud of, and I want to share it with you guys. I share it all the time with my Rebirth YouTube station, the posts that I put up on social media, and I always tell you guys what went on in the past, and I always tell you about my confidence because I want you to see where it started and where it is now, to give you guys hope. Next week, I'm going to have Dr. Patel on, Samir Patel from Fox Chase Cancer Center. I'm excited to have him on. Me and him grown up in this business together, and I could track all the things that we did together back in the day and how we've grown into a friendship today, because we weren't always friends. And I say that in a way because we work in the hospital together, so we weren't friends. He was a surgeon. we were cool and we were cordial, but we had incidences that where we weren't so cool and we weren't so cordial. We were cordial because we were professionals, but we were young professionals, and it's different. Now that we're older and we have this different outlook, and I just love him, and I love how he carries himself. I'm so proud of the family and the life that he's built, and I watched him build it. And he told me recently that he's watched me from afar and he's proud of me and the things and that I'm doing today. So again, I'm gonna have him on next week. Let them know Dr. Patel is here. Excited about that. But I'm gonna encourage you guys. Shout out to I always want to shout out to people who listen to the show, who I meet. So who I meet every day and who tell me that they like the show, or the people that I know at work. Shout out to people at my current job. Shout out to people at my former job, and rest in peace to Wanda Wilson. We loved her so much. I loved her, and she taught me a lot. Her enthusiasm, her zest, and her zeal, and her bigger than life persona will be missed. I can't even believe that I'm saying this, but she will live on in my memories, and I will live a fuller life so that I can include her. So shout out to Wanda Wilson and to so many others, and to people who listen to this podcast. I hope that I give you guys something to lean on and to build your lives on, to help you overcome some of the challenges that we all face. All right. So again, if you're a healthcare professional, please go to rateditofficial.com. Do an anonymous review. If you're shopping, please consider my store, Sheila's House of Style. Go to the website, SheilaByJohn.com. Everything in the store is 15% off with promo code LOVE. I share a portion of everything that I make with stage 4 breast cancer research, which is near to my heart. Too many women are dying because of that. That portion of breast cancer is under research because of the funding. So when you buy something from me, know that I'm sharing a portion of that sale with stage 4 breast cancer research and Phil Abundance and the San Diego Food Bank. All right. Thank you for listening. I hope that you guys got something out of it, and I hope that you'll keep it savvy. All right. Cool. Thank you.